When we started writing our thoughts down on paper, it opened up endless possibilities. Ideas could grow beyond the borders of the mind, and it changed the world. Somewhere along the way, we lost touch with paper, distracted by devices made for every purpose except for thinking and focus. On edge, waiting for the next notification. But what if new technology didn't pull us away from paper, but brought us closer to it? Listen. That's not paper. It's the sound of the new Remarkable Paper Pro, rewriting the future. A paper tablet with a true color ink display, gentle reading light, and unheard of tactility. With digital features for taking notes, thinking, and organizing, without any distractions. Paper is about to change the world again. Get your paper tablet at remarkable.com today.
Before we begin, heads up. This episode deals with child sexual abuse and the fallout from a high-profile case. It doesn't get graphic, but the subject matter is heavy. Please take care. Some crimes are so heartbreaking or shocking, they change laws, change society, or even earn the label crime of the century. But the stories that made headlines in decades past aren't necessarily remembered today. I'm Amber Hunt, a journalist and author, and in each episode of this show, I'll examine a case that's maybe lesser known today, but was huge when it happened. This is Crimes of the Centuries. When Joe Paterno took the head coaching job at Penn State University in 1966, the stadium the team played in held a few more than 46,000 fans. Over the course of his 46-year-long career, the arena had to be expanded 6 times so that now, on Football Saturday in State College, Pennsylvania, 106,000 people can squeeze in to watch the Nittany Lions play against their Big Ten rivals. That only comes with winning. And winning was good for Penn State. It brought a kind of prestige to the school, a bit of shine. Life was so good in State College that it was nicknamed Happy Valley. You don't have to be a college football fan to know that 45 years as the coach at the same university means that you did something that A, was pleasing to the fan base, B, made boosters, alumni, and administrators beholden to you, and C, brought in a heap of cash for the school. At the beginning of the 2011 season, with 409 wins under his belt, Paterno was the winningest coach in NCAA Division I football history. He had given the school 2 national championships, 24 bowl game wins, and a library he helped pay for with his and his wife's names attached. Paterno was more than good for Penn State. He was revered as the kind of leader who built the kind of men that make this country better. Alongside him for 32 seasons was his defense coordinator, Jerry Sandusky. So successful at that, Sandusky was known in football circles as the Dean of Linebacker University. In Pennsylvania, though, he was also known as an exceptionally nice guy who went out of his way to reach out to underprivileged kids, to give them his time, substantial guidance, and the tools to succeed. He almost single-handedly founded the Second Mile, a nonprofit with the goal of helping at-risk children and their parents in the state. Those who were listed as Second Mile board members were luminaries like current Kansas City Chiefs coach Andy Reid, golfer Arnold Palmer, former Eagles head coach Dick Vermeil, and the actor Mark Wahlberg. Sandusky's legacy was such that he decided in 2000 to write a book about his life and work. He had already successfully written 3 books on developing linebackers, coaching linebackers, and drills to improve linebackers. In a piece written just after the scandal broke by Ann O'Neill and Wayne Drash for CNN, the authors referenced the autobiography as a way to understand the man. Sandusky, the story read, quote, writes that even beyond his drive to win and perform good works, He has a tendency to push too hard, go too far, and get himself in trouble with his pranks," end quote. He wrote, "I believe I live a good part of my life in a make-believe world. I enjoyed pretending as a kid, and I love doing the same as an adult with these kids." What a guy. He retired from coaching at the college level in 1999, but never left the university's orbit. On November 5th, 2011, Sandusky was publicly charged with 52 counts of sexually molesting 8 boys between 1994 and 2009. The scandal was huge and had a lasting impact, not just on Penn State, but nationwide. It sparked debate about child protection laws and became a major wake-up call about accountability. But that came later. In the immediate aftermath, something strange happened. Sandusky's little-known autobiography, which wasn't widely available in bookstores, suddenly started selling for over $100 on eBay. The title, rather horribly, it was called Touched. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by ButcherBox. We had a cookout with the neighbors last weekend, and I felt so fancy pants providing the ButcherBox chicken tenders to Sean, our favorite grill master.
That was great grilled chicken. Everyone kept going back for seconds.
Right? And the next night, I made a rack of ribs from the same box. Now, I don't do ribs often, but even I could tell the quality was top-notch. ButcherBox delivers better meat and seafood straight to your door, including 100% grass-fed beef, free-range organic chicken, pork raised crate-free, and wild-caught seafood.
All ButcherBox proteins are sourced from partners who meet strict animal welfare and sustainability standards. That means no antibiotics or added hormones, ever.
We picked a curated box this time, but you can customize it too. Whether you're feeding the family or just trying to cook better meals without the stress, ButcherBox has a plan that fits.
Plus, every box ships free, always, and includes members-only perks like recipe inspiration, tips, and exclusive deals that help you make the most of every meal.
Right now, ButcherBox is offering our listeners $20 off their first box and free protein for a year.
Go to butcherbox.com/COTC to get this limited time offer and free shipping always.
That's butcherbox.com/COTC. Don't forget to use our link so they know we sent you. The only child of parents who ran a recreation center in the coal country town of Washington, Pennsylvania, Sandusky idolized his father, noting in his book that on his dad's desk was a sign that read, "Don't give up on a bad boy because he might turn out to be a great young man." Art Sandusky and his wife, Evelyn May, weren't just working with the rec center kids to better their basketball or swimming skills, but they often tutored them in school subjects. On a few occasions, the couple took in those who were particularly troubled. Their son longed to do the same, he wrote, especially after he got well known for his coaching skills at one of the state's preeminent universities. He'd gone to school there and married just after graduation in 1966 to a woman named Dottie Gross. The couple, as devoted as they were, couldn't have kids of their own, so they ended up adopting 6 children, 5 boys and 1 girl. 3 were adopted as infants, and the other 3 came through foster care. 2 of those foster kids had come through Sandusky's charity, the Second Mile. 2 went on to play football at Penn State, and another became a manager for the team. The Second Mile, which Sandusky said was the culmination of his lifelong dream, was founded in 1977 using the money he'd gotten from his first book, a primer on developing linebackers, which must have appealed to a certain audience. The organization began as a foster home for 8 boys, but grew to be a place where eventually 100,000 kids would get free camps and free recreational opportunities. The annual budget reached something like $1 million a year. Sandusky had no qualms about bringing the kids from the nonprofit to the football training facilities at Penn State so they could meet their hometown gridiron heroes and make use of the very same equipment so they too could bulk up. which must have seemed quite the big deal to kids who had substandard playgrounds and secondhand sports equipment to practice fine-tuning their own dreams. Sandusky, being Sandusky, went further. He brought them to the training table. Big-name schools have ginormous budgets for food and frolic. He's said to have regularly brought the kids gifts, written them letters of encouragement, and talked with them on the phone. CNN's deep dive piece, which was entitled The Great Pretender, also noted that, quote, before every home game, the coaches and players loaded onto buses at the practice facility and rode to the stadium as fans stood by and cheered. Sandusky always had a second-mile boy with him, end quote. It was always a boy, never a girl, who might have benefited from this special attention. In fact, CNN noted of the autobiography, quote, except for his wife and daughter, Sandusky hardly mentions women and girls in the book. Instead, he refers time and again to special boys he has grown close to over the years, end quote. So happy in Happy Valley, Sandusky turned down head coaching jobs at Marshall University, Temple University, and the University of Maryland. It was his second-mile kids who kept him anchored to State College, he said. He simply couldn't leave them. In 1990, President George W. Bush made the charity the 294th of his designated 1,000 Points of Light in recognition of the organization's positive impact upon its community. Apparently, the president believed what everyone in the area believed about the institution and those who ran it. To this day, Sandusky claims his innocence. Didn't happen. Can't understand why those boys he loved would lie about that, of all things. It's hard to figure. Sandusky, in all the interviews he gave after the allegations, comes off as a befuddled goof that doesn't quite get that loving children does not mean that rules about your behavior around them go waltzing out the door. Here's Sandusky speaking to NBC's Bob Costas just days after the indictment came down. You'll hear his lawyer, Joe Amendola, interrupt him at one point.
Are you sexually attracted to young boys, to underage boys?
Am I sexually attracted to underage boys? Sexually attracted? No, I enjoy young people.
I'm sitting there saying, well, what in the world is this question? What is it? Am I going to be, if I say, no, I'm not attracted to boys, that's not the truth, because I'm attracted to young people, boys, girls.
Yeah, but not sexually. You're attracted because you enjoy spending time.
Right, I enjoy, that's what I was trying to say. I enjoy spending time with young people. I enjoy spending time with people. I mean, my two favorite groups are the elderly and the young. The young because they don't think about what they say, and the old because they don't care. So I love being around both those groups of people, and neither one of them are going anywhere. They're not caught up like all of us in trying to make a living and trying to impress people. They are who they are, and that's why I love those groups.
The indictments were the result of a 3-year investigation and a slew of interviews of those both inside and outside the university. Still, they were largely a surprise to a whole raft of people when they were handed down that early November day. Readers of the Harrisburg Patriot News would not have been among the surprised. That's because on March 31st, 2011, 24-year-old Sarah Ganim, a Penn State grad just starting her career as a journalist, broke the story that Sandusky was the subject of a grand jury probe into his possible sexual assault of minor boys. The news did not hit hard or far, but Ganim had sources and, by August, reported that the number of those accusing Sandusky of abuse was growing. Still, not many other outlets took note. That is, until the November 4th announcement that a state grand jury had formally indicted him on 52 counts of sexual assault against 8 boys, violations which had occurred over a decade. That got the nation's attention, though it was not immediately recognized for the scandal it would become. While the Washington Post called the grand jury testimony hard to digest, the New York Daily News stuck a brief item on the indictments way back in the sports section. Sandusky was arrested the next day, a Sunday. But to say that everyone was surprised would be an overstatement. There had been signs. As far back as early May 1998, the mother of an 11-year-old boy who had been working out with Sandusky reported to Alicia Chambers, a licensed psychologist who had previously worked with the youngster, that the coach had showered with her child and had hugged him in a way that made the kid uncomfortable. Chambers told the mother of the boy to inform campus police, who spoke to the child and his mother and then, per protocol, reported the matter to the Center County Office of Children and Youth Services. From there, it was referred to an assistant district attorney who asked a counselor at the county's youth services department to interview Sandusky. After he did so, the county's child welfare worker decided Sandusky did not fit the profile of a pedophile. Alicia Chambers begged to differ. This from Ronald Smith's book, Wounded Lions. Quote, Center County District Attorney Ray Griecar was contacted because Sandusky kept calling the boy for 10 days after the showering incident. 2 weeks later, Jerry Lauro of the Office of Children, Youth, and Families in Harrisburg and a police officer interviewed Sandusky at the Lash Building. Sandusky indicated he had used poor judgment in showering with the boy, end quote. The athletic department was made aware of the child's accusation and that it had occurred on their premises. While it was not noted in the documents pertaining to the inquiry if university administrators had been told of the incident, Smith explained in his book that he reviewed emails from that period and found language between the university president, the athletic director, and the head of campus police that indicated they discussed whether the matter was, quote, the opening of a Pandora's box or just bad judgment, end quote. Emails included these words, critical issue, contact with genitals, and other children. Their final word on the matter was, quote, I touched base with the coach, keep us posted, thanks, end quote. The local district attorney at the time decided against going forward, suggesting that there was some question if the child could be believed. The youth services officers took no further action, but reported they had gotten a promise from Sandusky that he wouldn't again shower with any child. That's when Penn State police officials officially closed the case. 4 years later, in early 2002, graduate assistant coach Mike McQueary walked into the Penn State locker room in the Lash football building and was surprised to hear, quote-unquote, sexual sounds coming from the shower. He went to investigate and saw Sandusky engaging in what he would later testify was sexual intercourse with a naked 10-year-old boy. That's not the right term, obviously. The right term is rape. McQueary, shocked, called his father, then quietly left the facility. He drove to his parents' house nearby and told both his father and one of his father's friends, a local doctor, what he had seen. The next day, a Saturday, McQueary went to Coach Paterno's home and told him that he had seen Sandusky fondling a young boy in a gesture of a sexual nature. Later, Paterno would testify that he did not push McQueary to describe the scene because McQueary was too upset to do so. Paterno then thanked McQueary for the information and said to leave the matter to him. He also told McQueary that he had done the right thing. On Monday, Paterno reported the incident to Tim Curley, the school's athletic director. Curley then reported the matter to Gary Schultz, the university's vice president in charge of finance and business, as well as the university police. It wasn't long before Penn State University President Graham Spanier was told. A point to remember here, Sandusky was no longer employed by the university but had retired formally from it in 1999, the same year he was voted Assistant Coach of the Year by the American Football Coaches Association. But Sandusky had remained closely tied to the football program. He still retained his keys to all the pertinent facilities and had access to them at any time. The university had also been adamant about retaining ties with the second mile when Sandusky retired. They even drew up an explicit contract with the charity to, quote, work collaboratively with them in their community outreach, end quote. And yet, now the administration found itself in a trap of its own making. In Wounded Lions, Arthur Smith wrote that by the late 1970s, the athletic department, which was then headed by Paterno, had isolated itself from the academic departments at the school. Even the buildings in which the football team was housed were isolated on the edge of campus, with architecture and a vibe that did not mirror the rest of campus. In the ensuing decades, then, Paterno had been allowed to grow so powerful at the university that he could make demands about how things in his program were handled, including how his players would be dealt with when problems arose. From the book, quote, early on as a head coach, if a player ran into trouble and the police were involved, the state college and university police would call up Paterno, and then Paterno would punish the miscreants in a manner he felt was appropriate to the misconduct, end quote. Police reports, or the absence of them, bear this out. In 2002, Paterno was no longer heading up the athletic department because, frankly, he was bigger than that. He was seen in Happy Valley as something akin to the second coming, so the matter of what to do about Sandusky seemingly rested on him. Or did it? Whose problem was this now? Here's how Sandusky remembered the confrontation with Curley.
He was coming to me with a concern because, and I guess in his words, somebody had talked to him about inappropriate behavior in the shower. I told him that it didn't happen. And, there wasn't, in my mind, there wasn't inappropriate behavior.
Who should have seen the red flags? And what should they have done to protect the children whom they surely knew were in danger of some kind? The decision, likely reached without discussion, was to just keep the status quo. Jerry Sandusky was a treasure. Joe Paterno was a god. This was trouble no one wanted. That held for almost a decade. Then, a 15-year-old kid named Aaron Fisher started missing classes at Central Mountain High School, and his mother grew concerned. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Hungry Root. When it comes to grocery shopping, I want to eat healthier, but I'll be real. If I'm hungry and there are chips in the house, I'm eating chips.
Which is exactly why Hungry Root has been so helpful lately. It's like they preempt our bad decisions with better ones.
Yeah, our last box had all this great stuff for meal prep and snacky snacks. Boiled eggs, quinoa, peanut butter, low-sugar candy, even these better-for-you chips that I didn't immediately feel guilty about.
And they sent a little cheat sheet with recipe ideas using what's in the box, in case you didn't want to think too hard about it.
It's like having a grocery shopper, meal planner, and nutritionist all rolled into one. They tailor it to your preferences, and it gets smarter over time based on what you like.
And everything we've tried has been quick to make or just grab and go. Honestly, it's been a relief to have healthy options that don't feel like a chore.
You're going to love Hungry Root as much as I do. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/COTC and use code COTC. That's hungryroot.com/COTC, code COTC to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/COTC, code COTC. Aaron Fisher, who would become victim one in the eventual criminal case, had told his high school principal why he was acting unmoored. Then he repeated to a child and youth services caseworker that his troubles at school stemmed from the ongoing sexual abuse by a football coach who volunteered there. Fisher had known Sandusky from the boys' days at Second Mile. Aaron's mother, Dawn, had found it curious when Sandusky first showed interest in her son, but Sandusky assured her he was only trying to help the single mother out. Dawn and Aaron told their story to ABC News.
Everybody knew who he was. He's a great guy. Everybody, even my own father, he said, he does great things for kids.
She didn't know that Sandusky first put his hand on Aaron's leg when he was 12, or that he started showing up to school asking to see him, or that the principal didn't think twice about pulling Aaron from class for such visits, or that when Aaron would try to distance himself from Sandusky, Sandusky got aggressive.
He once followed my bus home from school. He told me to get in the car. I took off running. He drove on the opposite side of the street, on oncoming traffic to catch up with me, and then I ran up an alley. He went to my house and parked out front. It was that bad. It was that bad of a, ex-girlfriend that you wish you never had.
All Dawn knew was that her son seemed to be withdrawing into himself. Finally, she met with school officials one day.
Aaron was melting down in the office. And then the principal went on to explain that Aaron had said that Jerry had done something sexual to him. And I immediately, told them that we needed to call the police. They tell me to go home and think about it. Go home and think about what? What is there to think about? We need to call the police right now.
The school informed the Center County District Attorney of the claim. This part of Pennsylvania is very close-knit, a place where everybody knew everybody. In this case, the Center County DA, Michael Madeira, had a sister who was married to one of Sandusky's sons. Madeira recused himself and sent the matter on to the Pennsylvania Attorney General at the time, a man named Tom Corbett. A small aside, when Tom Corbett was successfully elected governor in 2010, he released $3 million to help build Sandusky's multi-million-dollar Center for Excellence for Second Mile Children. He had known since 2002 that Sandusky was possibly molesting young boys, but politics, such as they are, prevailed. His large contributors were also Sandusky's charities contributors, and that's what good friends do for one another. Anyway, to hear Sandusky tell it, the boys at Second Mile were not victims, but something far better.
The environment was family-like, and the times that you had with them, all the times were precious times. They were significant times because they weren't going to have you and you weren't going to have them. So it was significant times. It was important times. And so, I guess it just happened that way. I don't know.
Whatever it was, some of those at Second Mile knew something. The Patriot News later reported that Second Mile executive Catherine Genovese had told a person in authority in 2008 that the charity was concerned about Sandusky's behavior. Later, those concerns appeared to be linked to Fisher, the young man that the newspaper identified as Victim 1. But the charity didn't pursue the issue. It would take Fisher, a confused teenager who had dared to say out loud that something terrible was going on, to get anyone to pay attention. A grand jury was impaneled to hear testimony. It took 3 years to do so, with some suggesting that it dragged because no one in power wanted to know the truth, and no one wanted to investigate their friends. The November 4th indictments meant heads would roll, and not just Sandusky's. 10 days after the charges against the coach became public, Jack Rakovitz, Second Mile's CEO and the husband of Genovese, announced his resignation. Also charged that November day were Tim Curley and Gary Schultz, each with one count of perjury for lying about what they knew about the allegations. University President Spanier issued a statement that gave the two university officials his unconditional support. But things were unraveling at hyperspeed now. The same day Sandusky was arrested, Paterno issued a statement saying he had been told of the incident in the shower by McQueary, but McQueary hadn't shared the details. What Paterno was reading in the grand jury report, he said, was news to him. Some people weren't convinced. In the November 5th issue of the Washington Post, sports columnist Michael Wise wrote, quote, "If the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office is to be taken at its word, if the sad, sickening details of the alleged sexual abuse of young boys by Jerry Sandusky are true, a once immaculate program thought of as beyond reproach is now close to beyond redemption. Paterno wasn't charged, but if Sandusky is guilty, Paterno would be guilty, just as Penn State's athletic director and a university vice president, who were charged with perjury and failure to report suspected child abuse on Saturday, would be guilty, end quote. On November 6th, Sandusky was arrested and then released on a $100,000 unsecured bail. Paterno then issued this statement, quote, "If true, the nature and amount of charges made are very shocking to me and all Penn Staters," end quote. The next day, Pennsylvania Attorney General Linda Kelly made it clear that Paterno was not the subject of any investigation, even as Graham Spanier and Tim Curley surrendered to police. Penn State canceled Paterno's weekly news conference, which, given that the football season was in full swing at the time, seemed to bewilder, then anger the loyalists. On November 8th, by 10 a.m., demonstrators gathered at Joe Paterno's home to show their support for the embattled coach. As the day wore on, more than 1,000 others strolled downtown and campus to, again, show their support for a man who they thought deserved it. In video of that day, the elderly coach seemed pleased and a bit embarrassed by the attention.
Get a good night's sleep, all right? Study, all right? We still got things to do. All right, I'm out of it maybe now. A phone call to put me out of it, but we'll go from here, okay? Hey, good luck, everybody. Hey, thanks for coming.
The next day, November 9th, the 85-year-old Paterno announced he would retire when the football season came to an end. That same night, around 9:30, a special bulletin aired on local stations.
The Board of Trustees and Graham Spanier have decided that effective immediately, Dr. Spanier is no longer president of the university. In addition, Joe Paterno is no longer the head football coach, effective immediately.
The coach had only been told minutes before. His wife explained.
When it rang, I gave Joe the phone. And he said, okay. And he hung up. He said goodbye. And he said, they just fired me. So I redialed the number. And I said, after 61 and a half years, he deserves better. Goodbye. And I hung up. I said, I couldn't believe that's how they can take your heart away that quickly.
Like moths to flames, 4,000 to 5,000 students, fans, and enraged locals took to downtown streets to protest the board's actions. It was not a peaceful, well-organized demonstration. Instead, the crowd ended up causing property damage, upending cars and throwing rocks that caused minor injuries. They set garbage and shirts on fire. You know, the typical chaos that comes from unfocused anger and a crowd that's had a little too much to drink. The city blamed reporters for pushing the board to disclose their late-night decisions as quickly as possible. Geez, the police chief wasn't even in town. A few days later, student leaders held a vigil of sorts, the kind usually held when someone dies. A little more than a week after he was fired, Joe Paterno, via a family spokesman, divulged that the coach had been diagnosed with treatable lung cancer. At the end of the month, another Sandusky accuser came forward. On December 7th, 12 new charges were added, accusing Sandusky of abusing 2 more boys. He was arrested again and held on $250,000 bond. Dottie Sandusky, the suspect's beleaguered wife, stood behind him, calling the accusations absolutely untrue. She even went into the basement with a TV reporter and cameraman to show how she, who was upstairs, would have heard young boys screaming as they told the grand jury they had while being sexually assaulted by her husband. Asked why 18 young men would choose to endure the spectacle and, for some, the shame of telling their stories, Dottie told CNN,
I think that they could have been manipulated by people. I think a lot of them had financial problems. I don't believe their stories.
Joe Paterno died on January 22, 2012, never having lived to see his longtime friend face trial, never having to answer questions he'd rather not be asked. When the trial got underway on June 11, 2012, a jury of 7 women and 5 men stood ready to do their duty. 6 of the 12 had ties to Penn State, including 2 professors and an instructor at the school. One had a husband who worked with Mike McQueary's father. At the trial, Aaron Fisher, aka Victim 1, was now an 18-year-old man who looked Sandusky in the eye and, in what the Patriot News called searing detail, spoke of the personal torment he had endured for more than 2 years. His pain was evident when defense attorney Joe Amendola kept prodding him about what exactly happened. Before answering, Fisher looked at the prosecutor's table and said, "Make them stop." Now, a content warning, I'm going to do a brief, simplified rundown of the victim's testimony just until the next ad break. If that's uncomfortable for you, feel free to skip ahead. Victim 1 had told the grand jury and repeated for this jury that Sandusky had performed oral sex on him more than 20 times when he was 13 and 14. Victim 2 was the young man raped by Sandusky and seen by McQuarrie in February 2001. Victim 3 said Sandusky would touch his genitals when he was asleep at Sandusky's house. Victim 4 said his relationship with Sandusky included multiple instances of sexual violations over a few years. Victim 5 said Sandusky showered with him in 1998 and, pinning him in a corner, rubbed him and placed the boy's hands on his genitals. Victim 6 said Sandusky lathered him in the shower, then bear hugged him when he was just 11. This is the young man who told his mother, who reported the matter, which prompted an investigation that led nowhere. Victim 7 told the jury that he'd had a blurry memory of Sandusky's improper touching of him in the football locker room showers. That was in 1994, when the 27-year-old would have been just 8. A janitor witnessed Victim 8 being given oral sex in the shower by Sandusky as the boy was pinned against the wall. The incident was reported to the janitor's superior, but went no further. That was in the fall of 2000. Victim 9 was forced to perform oral sex on Sandusky repeatedly while living in the family's basement. He alleged that Sandusky had tried to rape him 16 times between 2004 and 2008. Victim 10 said that in the fall of 2007, he was filleted by Sandusky in the family's basement bedroom and that he was forced to do the same on Sandusky. None of them indicated that they felt Dottie Sandusky had known exactly what was going on. But how could she not? Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Ollie. So our dogs, Ripley and Ellis, just got back from a week at the spa while we were on vacation, and while they were pampered there, they didn't have their favorite dog food. We'd only sent them with their dry food.
They came home like, where's the good stuff? It was very clear they missed their all.
Oh yeah, we've already restarted their delivery. Nothing else gets that same enthusiastic tail thumping during mealtime.
Ollie makes fresh, human-grade meals for dogs. No weird filler, no mystery meat, just real food made in U.S. kitchens.
Our box has included things like beef with sweet potatoes, turkey with blueberries, recipes that sound like actual meals, not just random stuff scraped together. You can choose a full fresh plan or even mix it with their baked recipes. We've tried both.
And they ease you into the diet with a feeding guide, so it's not just a food drop-off, it's a whole setup.
Dogs deserve the best, and that means fresh, healthy food. Head to ollie.com/COTC, tell them all about your dog, and use code COTC to get 60% off your welcome kit when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a happiness guarantee on the first box, so if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back.
That's OLLIE.com/COTC and enter code COTC to get 60% off your first box.
Dottie Sandusky took the stand in defense of her husband, Jerry. Here's Tom Klein, one of the victim's attorneys.
I saw in Dottie Sandusky's testimony a loyal wife, but a wife who had to concede the obvious points in the prosecution case, which was that these boys were there in the home with frequency and in the basement and being tucked into bed by her husband.
The verdict was reached Friday, June 22nd, 2012. Sandusky was found guilty on 45 of the 48 counts. His sentencing would follow in the fall. The day before it was announced, 2 more new accusers came forward, prompting immediate discussion among prosecutors, who eventually decided to pursue a second case against Sandusky. That one would feature a named victim who had been a supporter of the coach throughout most of the trial. His name was Matt Sandusky. The 33-year-old son of Jerry and Dottie, Matt had gone to prosecutors during the trial to divulge his experiences when he was younger and living in the family home. Matt had been adopted at 18 after being taken in by the Sanduskys a few years before. Living in his biological parents' home, he'd been physically abused, a bit of a juvenile delinquent living in an unsafe home with adults who were in and out of jail constantly. Later, after the trial, Matt had a sit-down with Oprah, where he talked about his abuse at the hands of his adopted father and how that prompted a suicide attempt.
Did the abuse subside after the suicide attempt?
Yes, after the suicide attempt, the really sexual abuse stopped. The manipulation, the control, the hand on the leg anytime I was in the car, him pulling me off to a room anytime I was at the house, he would always pull me into a separate room to speak alone. And those were the times when he's reinforcing and checking in with me to make sure that I'm not speaking, that I'm not having thoughts about telling. And for me, coming where I came from in my environment, the police, being arrested was a daily possibility for me, the things that I was doing. And I had already been arrested at a younger age.
Yeah.
And it was always reinforcing that the police were asking questions and they were coming around, but he was handling it. Mm-hmm. So that's him reinforcing that he is in control of the situation.
According to the Patriot News, the allegations from his own adopted son led many to think that Jerry had not taken the stand in his own defense for fear that Matt would be called. That testimony, it was later speculated, would have undermined anything his father said. The other new allegation came from Travis Weaver, then 30, who filed a separate civil suit about the elder Sandusky. The mood in and around Happy Valley was anything but. Sides had been taken. On one side, the victims had spoken very loudly. Still, the community was horrified, trying to shore up its own self-image as a good place to raise kids, a safe haven from all that was bad, even while they acknowledged its failings regarding these young men. The other side was only interested in deifying Paterno, making sure he had remained, in the minds of the nation, the winningest and most honorable of American football coaches, a man devoid of wrongdoing, a man who simply hadn't known. Sandusky was, for almost everyone, the man who had spoiled a very good party. And the spoiling was ongoing. A very large headline in the Center Daily Times on Monday, July 23, 2012 said it all. Gone. The lead paragraph read, quote, "As the sun rose, the Joe Paterno statue fell. Early Saturday morning, before many residents woke, Penn State workers armed with jackhammers and a forklift removed the controversial statue from its place next to Beaver Stadium." End quote. The bronze, 7-foot-high, 900-pound statue of the man in a victorious moment with 4 players behind him was moved to an undisclosed location. It has not been seen since. Havoc Part 2 ensued. Then, the next day, the National Collegiate Athletic Association announced the sanctions it was imposing on the university's football program. That is, the school had to pay a $60 million fine, endure a 4-year postseason ban, and reduce the number of scholarships it could award. Oh, and one more thing. Every Penn State victory from 1998 to 2011 was vacated. That meant that 112 victories that fans had once rejoiced in were as gone as the statue, technically still in memory, but not remembered in official records ever again. Which meant that Joe Paterno was not the winningest anything anymore. The sanctions were, according to NCAA President Mark Emmert, not a punishment, but to
make sure the university establishes an athletic culture and daily mindset in which football will never again be placed ahead of educating, nurturing, and protecting young people.
The Big Ten Conference piled on, leveling its own $13 million fine on Penn State. On October 9th, 2012, 68-year-old Jerry Sandusky learned he would spend the next 30 to 60 years of what was left of his life in prison, which, granted, is a long time. But the crimes he was convicted of carried a potential sentence of more than 330 years. So you could say he got off light. Judy Woodruff from PBS.
The former football coach who plunged Penn State University into scandal by his sexual abuse of young boys over many years was sentenced today. The judge called his crime a story of betrayal.
Sandusky was undeterred.
They can take away my life. They can make me out as a monster. They can treat me as a monster, but they can't take away my heart. In my heart, I know I did not do these alleged disgusting acts.
Prosecutor Joseph McGettigan wasn't having it.
He displayed deviance, narcissism, a lack of feeling for the pain he caused others, and to the end, an unwillingness to accept responsibility. In fact, his statement today was a masterpiece of banal self-delusion, completely untethered from reality.
Sandusky is still in prison. He's 81 years old. What followed was a veritable buffet of lawsuits leveled against the defendant, the charity he founded, and the university that employed him for 3 decades. Mike McQueary, for example, filed suit against the university for being wrongfully terminated. The school ended up paying him $12.3 million. Things like this don't die a natural death. The university had decided very early in the scandal to commission its own investigation, employing former FBI Director Louis Freeh to do the honors. The 8-month-long work, which would later be criticized for being hurried, for being done in cahoots with the NCAA, and for overstepping its mandate, was a 267-page report issued July 12, 2012. The Patriot News did a fine job of cutting to the chase. The report found that, yes, there had been a cover-up by high-ranking university officials who were obsessed, that's the word the report used, with its image and the football program. That Paterno knew and had used his influence to quash any move to report earlier incidents to police. That the athletic staff had seen Sandusky in showers with boys before 1998. That Sandusky's 1999 retirement was not a function of any fear of being discovered. Rather, it was because Paterno had told him he would never succeed him as head coach. And lastly, that for 16 years, Penn State had ignored the federal law that requires institutions of higher education to report criminal acts. In other words, the report made clear that the people who had hired them to look into the matter were indeed accomplices to a serial child molester. The Second Mile was an early victim of the scandal. Just 2 weeks after the indictment was unsealed, the charity told the New York Times that it was preparing to cease operations. Lawyers stepped in to prevent that, fearful that monies that had been donated by the group would disappear. The charity then sent along notices that donors should, instead, give to the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape. Telling. 6 months later, Second Mile handed over all the programs and $2.5 million in assets to a Texas-based charity, Arrow Child and Family Ministries. By 2016, the charity was no more. That same year, in May, Penn Live published a report that offered new evidence that Coach Paterno may have heard accusations about Sandusky's molestation of children as early as 1976.
There's a new development in the Penn State University sex abuse case. It involves the school's former football coach, Joe Paterno. According to a Pennsylvania judge, one of the university's insurers claims a child told Paterno back in 1976 that he'd been sexually molested by Jerry Sandusky.
The story was a result of Penn State's desire to recoup some of the $59.7 million paid to 26 of Sandusky's victims by suing its insurance carrier for the amount. That case included a court order by one of the university's insurers that Paterno knew as early as '76 that Sandusky was, at best, inappropriate with young boys, and at worst, a rapist. A Penn Live article says the 2016 court order in Penn State's insurance case mentioned claims that assistant coaches may have seen Sandusky acting inappropriately with kids as far back as 1987 and 1988. One of those incidents was supposedly even reported to the school's athletic director. When directly asked in an interview with the Washington Post's Sally Jenkins just before his death, Paterno said he had no idea how Sandusky had evaded being discovered for so long. He told Jenkins, quote, "I wish I knew. I don't know the answer to that. It's hard," end quote. Jenkins would later say that Paterno was a liar. And while what Joe knew and when he knew it can be debated, and still is in Happy Valley, Paterno was never accused of wrongdoing. He was considered by the authorities to have fulfilled his legal obligations when he reported what he had been told to those who were, technically, his superiors. Former university president Graham Spanier served 58 days in the Center County Correctional Facility. Former university athletic director Tim Curley served 3 months in the county jail. Gary Schultz, the VP in charge of campus security, served 2 months in the same facility. The Patriot News won the 2012 Pulitzer Prize for local reporting, with Sarah Gainham being singled out for praise for her courageous work. In February 2017, one of Sandusky's adopted sons was charged with asking a minor girl to send him nude photos of herself and asking a 15-year-old to perform oral sex on him. Jeff Sandusky, who was then 41, had been working at the State Correctional Institute in Rockview, Pennsylvania at the time and was promptly suspended. In lieu of a trial, Jeff Sandusky pleaded guilty to 12 felonies and 2 misdemeanors. The judge, acting in concert with the district attorney of Center County, gave him a sentence of 3.5 to 6 years in prison. In the end, it's estimated that Penn State University spent well over $250 million in defending the case, settling with victims, attempting to rectify the underlying causes of the athletic-academic power differential, and the subsequent programming of new initiatives to make sure it never happened again. The Sandusky case also, strangely, highlighted a glaring problem with the Pennsylvania Right to Know Act. Penn State University had thrived under a historic exemption to the state's open records law since 2008, when its then president convinced legislators that what the university did was not their or anyone else's business. The exclusion covered PSU, Temple University, the University of Pittsburgh, and Lincoln University. Never mind that the schools got a total of $500 million in taxpayer money to operate. But in this case, Penn State's records, including phone records, emails, police records, calendars, and memos, were closed to any and all. There was a lot of talk after the Sandusky verdict about how it all might have come to light sooner, how a few boys might have been spared. People said the laws had to change to make sure something like this never happened again. And they did change. Mandatory reporting rules were tightened. Oversight of youth programs increased. In Pennsylvania, a new law in 2014 required university employees who worked directly with minors to get child abuse background checks every 3 years and have their fingerprints taken. That proved to be a bit cumbersome, though, so it's since been revised to every 5 years. But none of that would have stopped Sandusky. His record looked clean. So, yes, the rules are different now. But the truth is, rules only matter if people are willing to follow them, if they're willing to speak up and act, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. To research this case, journalist Amy Wilson read Ronald Smith's Wounded Lions, Joe Paterno, Jerry Sandusky, and the Crisis in Penn State Athletics. She also read the complete coverage of the unfolding scandal in the Harrisburg Patriot News, as well as relevant bits in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and other newspapers. She also perused the hefty, dense, and deadly dull free report. You can thank her later. Crimes of the Centuries is available early and ad-free through Grab Bag Collab. Join us at patreon.com/grabbagcollab to hear not just exclusive content related to this show, but to also get access to several other shows on our profit-sharing network. Unless noted in the citations, this show was researched and written by me, Amber Hunt, and produced by Amanda Rossman and Henry Lavoie. Original music is by Bruce Hunt, Andrew Higley, and occasionally by my son, Hunt Van Ben Scoten. Other music comes from Soundstripe and Epidemic Sound. If you like the show, help us out by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. For more information or to recommend a case, go to centuriespod.com.